The CEO came to acquire the land his daughter's school stood on. She didn't know the quiet carpenter she was trying to displace held the key to her company's darkest secret. Eleanor Vance measured the world in clean lines and predictable outcomes. Her life was a skyscraper of glass and steel, each floor a calculated success built upon the one below. From her corner office, the city sprawled out like a circuit board, a complex system she understood and, in many ways, controlled. Oakhaven was not part of that system. It was a place of winding roads and unpredictable foliage, a town that operated on a logic as foreign to her as a dead language. She was there for a single purpose: to acquire the final parcel of land for Vance Global's new state-of-the-art distribution hub. It was a routine acquisition, a small, stubborn knot in an otherwise smooth and efficient plan. The knot was a worn-down elementary school and the 5 acres it sat upon. Her sedan, a silent, black machine of German engineering, felt alien on the gravel road leading to the property line. It kicked up dust that settled on its perfect finish. Eleanor ignored it. She stepped out of the car, her heels sinking slightly into the soft earth. The air smelled of damp soil and pine, a thick, organic scent that clung to her tailored suit. A man was there by an old split-rail fence that marked the edge of the school grounds. He was kneeling, his back to her, focused on his work. He wore faded jeans and a plain grey shirt, the fabric stretched across the hard muscle of his shoulders. His hands, calloused and capable, moved with a slow, deliberate economy, wrapping wire around a weathered post. He was a problem to be managed, an obstacle to be cleared. She approached, her footsteps unnaturally loud in the quiet. She cleared her throat. The man didn't startle. He finished tightening the wire before rising slowly, turning to face her. His eyes were the color of the grey sky before a storm. They held a stillness she found unsettling. He wasn't impressed by the car, or the suit, or the aura of command she carried like a shield. He simply waited. "I'm Eleanor Vance." Her voice was crisp, the sound of boardrooms and binding contracts. He nodded once. "Liam Cole." His voice was low with a rough edge like sanded wood. She gestured vaguely toward the school, a low brick building with a faded mural of children holding hands painted on one wall. "I'm here about the property. I represent the buyers. I know who you are." The words were flat, without accusation or deference, a statement of fact. This surprised her. She was accustomed to a certain amount of agitation or greed when she appeared in person. He showed neither. "Then you know our offer is more than generous. It's enough to build a new school twice the size with a proper athletic field." She had the numbers memorized, the cost-benefit analysis a perfect, logical argument in her mind. Land doesn't just have a price, it has a history. He looked past her at the ancient oak tree that gave the town its name, its branches spreading like a cathedral over the playground. Eleanor's patience, a finite and carefully managed resource, began to fray. "Mr. Cole, history doesn't pay for modern classrooms or improved infrastructure. Our project will bring jobs, tax revenue. It's a net positive for the entire community." She was selling a future she had designed. He looked back at her, his gaze unwavering. Some things aren't meant to be sold. He reached into the back pocket of his jeans and pulled out a folded, yellowed piece of paper. He held it out to her. His knuckles were scraped. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before taking it. The paper was brittle, the creases worn soft with time. It was a handwritten letter, the ink faded to a pale sepia. "You should read this. It's a copy. It's about a promise made by the man who first owned this land. A man named Alistair Vance." The name struck her like a muffled bell. her great-grandfather, the founder of it all. She stared at the name, then back at the quiet man who seemed to know more about her own history than she did. The clean lines of her world had just begun to blur. Back in her hotel room, the sterile quiet felt oppressive. She smoothed the copied letter onto the polished surface of the desk. The script was elegant, archaic. It spoke of the land as a public trust, a place deeded to the children of Oakhaven in perpetuity, a sanctuary for learning and growth. It was a moral declaration, not a legally binding covenant. In her world, that meant it was worthless, a piece of sentimental fluff. But the name, Alistair Vance, and the fact that this man, this carpenter, had it, was a splinter under her skin. She placed a call to her legal department. I need everything you can find on a man named Liam Cole in Oakhaven. Local records, work history, financials, everything. And cross-reference Vance Global's historical acquisitions with the Oakhaven Township deeds. Look for any anomalies related to the original land grant from Alistair Vance. The command was issued, and the machine of her corporation began to whir. She expected to find a disgruntled local, perhaps a man with a minor criminal record or a history of failed businesses, looking for a bigger payout. The report that came back hours later was not what she expected. It was a blank wall. Liam Cole had paid for his small house and the land around it in cash 10 years ago. He paid his property taxes on time. He had no debt, no mortgage, no credit cards. He ran a small, licensed carpentry business that seemed to do just enough work to sustain a quiet life. He was a ghost in the system she knew so well. But her legal team was good. They dug deeper, past the surface of Oakhaven. They dug into the past. The file arrived on her encrypted laptop just after midnight. It was a digital ghost story. Liam Cole was not just a carpenter. 10 years ago, he was Liam Cole, senior forensic accountant at one of the top firms in the city. He was a legend in certain circles, a man who could find a single misplaced decimal in a mountain of data, a man who could make numbers confess their sins. He had left it all behind. He had vanished from that world on a single day, the day his wife died. Her name was Sarah Cole. She was an investigative journalist. Her specialty was environmental crime, and at the time of her death, she had been building a case against a chemical company called Northwood Industries. A single car accident on a rain-slicked road. The official report was clean. A tragic, random event. Eleanor scrolled down, her finger cold on the trackpad. A year after her death, Northwood Industries had been acquired in a quiet, unpublicized deal. The buyer was a subsidiary of Vance Global. A cold dread, an emotion she rarely felt, settled deep in her bones. This was no longer a simple land deal. The town meeting was her arena. She was an expert at navigating the currents of public opinion, at turning skepticism into assent with carefully chosen words and undeniable logic. The school gymnasium was crowded, the air thick with the smell of floor wax and anxious humanity. She stood at the podium, a figure of cool authority in a sea of plaid shirts and worried faces. She laid out her vision, the sleek architectural renderings of the proposed distribution hub, the charts projecting economic growth. She spoke of progress, of the future. Her eyes scanned the crowd. She found him easily. Liam Cole stood at the back, not watching her, but watching a small girl beside him. The girl had his same serious eyes and a cascade of dark hair. She was sitting on the floor, a sketch pad on her lap, entirely absorbed in her own world. His daughter, Lily. The name was in the file. As the floor opened for questions, a wave of fear and anger rolled toward the stage. Eleanor deflected it with practiced ease. She had answers for everything. The environmental impact, the traffic concerns, the loss of the town's character. She was winning. She could feel the tide of the room turning. When the meeting concluded, people began to cluster, to talk amongst themselves. Eleanor remained at the podium, a queen on her dais. Then the little girl was there. She had slipped through the crowd unnoticed. She stood before the podium, looking up at Eleanor with an unnerving, solemn curiosity. In her small hand, she held a piece of paper torn from her sketch pad. She held it up. Eleanor looked down. It was a child's drawing, rendered in thick, waxy crayon. A magnificent, sprawling tree with a sturdy trunk and a vast canopy of green. The great oak outside. The girl didn't speak. She just offered the drawing. It was not a transaction. It was a gift. Eleanor was momentarily paralyzed. She didn't know the protocol for this. Slowly, she reached down and took the drawing. The paper was warm from the child's hand. "Thank you." The words felt strange in her own mouth. Liam was there a moment later, his hand gently on his daughter's shoulder. He looked at Eleanor, then at the drawing in her hand. His expression was unreadable. He simply nodded and guided his daughter away, melting back into the crowd. Eleanor stood alone, the polished arguments and economic projections forgotten. In her hand, she held a child's drawing of a tree. It felt heavier than any contract she had ever signed. Her phone buzzed late that night. The caller ID displayed a name that tightened her jaw. Marcus Thorne. He was a senior executive at Vance, a shark who swam in the same corporate waters she did. He was her primary rival, a man of slick smiles and hidden knives. "Eleanor, how is our little country excursion going?" His voice was a smooth, condescending purr. "It's being handled, Marcus." "I trust it is. The board is getting anxious to break ground. This Oakhaven hub was my pet project, you know. I'd hate to see it get bogged down in small-town politics." There was an edge to his voice, a pressure she wasn't used to receiving. Marcus had been the one to champion this location, overriding the logistics team who had recommended a site closer to the main highway. He had been insistent, unusually so. "The timeline is aggressive but achievable. The holdouts will be managed." "Good. Just get it done, Eleanor. No more delays. Don't let some farmer with a grudge derail a billion-dollar project." He hung up. Eleanor stared at the phone. He had never called her in the field before. He had never shown such a personal interest in the mundane mechanics of site acquisition. His urgency was a red flag waving in the silent room. She turned her attention back to the problem of the deed. Alistair Vance's promise. Her team had confirmed the original town charter, and land grants were stored in the county records office, a dusty building in the next town over. She decided to go herself. She preferred to see critical documents with her own eyes. The records clerk was a frail, elderly man who seemed to move in slow motion. He peered at her over his spectacles when she requested the Oakhaven founding ledgers from the early 20th century. He shuffled away into a cavernous back room. He returned 20 minutes later, his face a mask of confusion. "That's funny. They're not where they should be. The whole box is gone." "Gone?" "I can't explain it. We have the digital scans, of course." He led her to a humming, outdated computer terminal. He typed with 2 fingers, pulling up the file. The screen flickered. File corrupted. The clerk blinked. "Well, I'll be. I've never seen that happen before." Eleanor felt a cold certainty creeping up her spine. This was not a coincidence. This was deliberate. Someone was erasing the past. As she walked back to her car, a notification appeared on her laptop, which she'd left in the passenger seat. It was a new email from an anonymous, encrypted address. The subject line was blank. The body of the message contained 6 words. "Stop digging in Oakhaven," or else. The threat was clean, sterile, and utterly chilling. It was the language of her world deployed against her. The clean lines had fractured, the predictable outcomes had vanished. She was no longer in control. She did something she had never done in her professional life. She acted on instinct. She started her car and drove, not back to the city, but deeper into the winding country roads, toward the one person who seemed to stand at the center of this storm. Toward Liam Cole. The sky had turned the color of a bruise. Rain began to fall, first as a whisper, then as a roar. It came down in solid, blinding sheets, turning the road into a dark river. The world outside her car dissolved into a grey blur. She was driving too fast, her mind racing ahead of the vehicle. A flash of lightning illuminated the road, and in that stark, white moment, she saw it. A massive oak branch, a casualty of the wind, lay sprawled across the narrow lane. She slammed on the brakes. The sedan hydroplaned, spinning in a sickening, uncontrolled arc. It came to a stop with a jarring thud, its front end buried in the muddy ditch. Silence. The engine was dead. The rain hammered against the roof. Eleanor sat for a long moment, her hands locked on the steering wheel. She was stranded. She was alone. And she was afraid. She took her phone, her laptop case, and pushed the door open against the wind. The rain soaked her instantly, her expensive suit turning dark and heavy. She remembered passing a small, unpaved lane a quarter of a mile back. A single mailbox stood at its entrance. The name on the side had been El Cole. She began to walk. The mud pulled at her heels, trying to claim her expensive shoes. The wind tore at her hair, whipping it across her face. By the time she saw the faint, warm light of a house through the trees, she was shivering, drenched, and stripped of all her usual armor. She stumbled up the porch steps and knocked on the solid wood door. It opened. Liam Cole stood there, a dish towel in his hand. He looked at her, a mess of ruined silk and rain-plastered hair, and his expression didn't change. There was no surprise, no satisfaction. He simply stepped back and held the door open. "Trouble?" he asked. The word was an understatement of such magnitude it was almost funny. She nodded, unable to speak past the chattering of her teeth. He disappeared for a moment and came back with a thick, soft blanket. He draped it over her shoulders without a word. The house was warm. It smelled of wood smoke and coffee. Everything was made of wood, handcrafted and solid. The chairs, the table, the bookshelves that lined the walls. It was a space built by his own hands. His daughter Lily sat at the large kitchen table, a book open in front of her. She looked up at Eleanor with wide, curious eyes. "My car," Eleanor finally managed to say. "The road is blocked. I heard it fall. The big oak at Miller's Bend. Happens every few years." He gestured to a chair. "Sit. I'll make you some coffee." She sat, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. She felt like a refugee, an exile from a world that had suddenly turned on her. He moved around the kitchen with the same quiet efficiency she'd seen at the fence line. He placed a heavy ceramic mug in front of her. The heat seeped into her cold hands. He sat down opposite her, his own mug cradled in his palms. The storm raged outside, but inside this small house there was a profound stillness. "You shouldn't have come back. It wasn't a question. I received a threat. The county records concerning the school land have been erased." He didn't seem surprised. He just nodded, taking a slow sip of his coffee. "They want the land," he said. "They want what's underneath it." "What is underneath it?" He looked at his daughter, who was now quietly drawing in her sketchbook again. His gaze was filled with a fierce, protective love. He looked back at Eleanor. "The truth. and in the quiet of that storm-bound house, he told her everything. He spoke of his wife, Sarah. He described her not with the flowery language of grief, but with the precise details of a man who had memorized every part of the person he had lost. Her relentless curiosity, her refusal to accept easy answers, the way she chewed on her pen when she was close to a breakthrough. She was investigating Northwood Industries, he explained. She was convinced they were using old, unlined containment ponds to dispose of toxic byproducts. The chemicals were leaching into the groundwater. This land, the school land, sits directly above the main aquifer for this entire region. Sarah had found a source inside the company, a chemist who was terrified but had a conscience. He had provided her with internal documents, soil sample results that were being falsified for the regulators. She had everything she needed. She was on her way to a secure location to upload the files to her editor. She never made it. The police called it an accident. The roads were wet, but the brakes on her car, they were new. I'd installed them myself the week before. They were perfect. He paused, his knuckles white around his mug. After she died, I tried to pursue it. But they were ready for me. They buried me in legal threats. They threatened to claim I was an unstable parent, to take Lily from me. They had a man overseeing the entire cover-up. Someone ruthless and well-connected. Who? Eleanor asked, though she already knew the answer. Marcus Thorne. The name hung in the air between them, a final, damning piece of the puzzle. Thorne had acquired Northwood for Vance Global to bury its liabilities, and now he wanted the Oakhaven land to build his hub directly on top of the evidence, sealing it forever beneath a mountain of concrete and steel. "My company," Eleanor whispered. "My great-grandfather's company did this." "Companies aren't people," Liam said, his voice quiet but firm. "They don't have morals. They just have objectives. The people inside them make the choices. Thorne made his. Now you have to make yours." Eleanor looked at the drawing Lily had given her, which she had carefully placed in her laptop bag. The drawing of the great oak tree, a tree that stood on poisoned ground. The alliance was forged in that moment, unspoken but absolute. A shared purpose. Justice for Sarah. Protection for Lily. A reckoning for Marcus Thorne. The storm broke before dawn. Liam worked for an hour with a chainsaw, clearing the fallen branch from the road. He towed her car from the ditch with his old truck. The engine was flooded, the electronics fried. It was a piece of sophisticated junk. "You'll have to stay," he said. "It'll take a day to get a tow truck out here from the city." There was no other option. Eleanor, who managed a global logistics empire, was trapped by a single downed tree and a ruined sedan. She spent the day in a strange, suspended reality. She watched Liam repair a loose shingle on his roof, his movements fluid and certain. She watched Lily teach her how to identify different bird calls. They ate a simple lunch of soup and thick slices of homemade bread. No one asked her about her work. No one seemed to care about the world she came from. Here, value was measured differently. It was measured in a well-mended fence, a warm meal, a child's laughter. That afternoon, Liam led her to his workshop, a converted barn behind the house. The air smelled of sawdust and varnish. Tools hung in perfect order on the walls. In the center of the room was a half-finished rocking chair, its lines graceful and strong. He walked to a heavy, antique tool chest in the corner. He unlocked it. Inside, nestled amongst old chisels and planes, was a sleek, silver hard drive. "Sarah's work," he said. "Everything is on here. Her notes, the source data, the internal memos, and a video deposition from her source. He had kept it safe for 10 years. A digital time bomb." "Why now?" Eleanor asked. Why trust me? He turned to look at her, his gaze direct. Because you came back, and because Thorne is scared of you. He wouldn't have sent that threat if he wasn't. You have the one thing I don't. What's that? Access. You can get into the room with him. He was right. She could walk into the lion's den because she was one of them. She was the perfect weapon. The plan began to form in her mind. Not a hostile takeover, but a meticulous dismantling. She would use the tools of her own world, its rules, its procedures, its arrogance, against itself. First, I need to make a call to someone I trust. She called Anya, her lawyer. Anya was a sharp, pragmatic woman who had navigated Eleanor through a dozen corporate minefields. She listened to the entire story without interruption. When Eleanor finished, there was a long pause on the line. 2 seconds of silence. Long ones. This is dangerous, Eleanor. Way beyond a breach of contract dispute. I know. What do you need from me? The loyalty in Anya's voice was a rock. I need you to file a preliminary injunction to halt the Oakhaven acquisition. Cite a newly discovered historical preservation claim based on an ancestral deed. It's thin, but it will buy us time. And I need you to quietly start tracing the financial path of the Northwood acquisition. Look for shell corporations, unusual payouts, anything connected to Marcus Thorne. Consider it done. Eleanor hung up. The first move had been made. Liam handed her the hard drive. It was cool and heavy in her hand, the weight of a life's last work. We need one more thing, he said. The original town charter, the copy Alistair Vance signed, the one that proves the land was never meant to be sold. It's gone, Liam. Erased. The official copy is, he said. But there's another one. He told her about Silas Croft. Silas was the town's unofficial historian, a man in his 90s who had lived in Oakhaven his entire life. His family had been among the first settlers. If anyone had a private copy, it would be him. They found Silas on his porch, watching the evening draw in. He was as weathered and sturdy as the oak trees he sat among. Liam made the introductions. Eleanor Vance, Silas said, his eyes sharp and clear. Alistair's great-granddaughter. You have his eyes. Eleanor was taken aback. He knew her great-grandfather. He was a good man, a man of his word. He loved this place. He believed a town's soul was in its commitment to its children. Silas listened as they explained the situation. He nodded slowly, his gaze distant, as if looking back through time. When they finished, he went inside his small, cluttered house. He returned with a long tin document tube. He opened it and carefully unrolled a piece of thick, yellowed parchment. It was the original Oakhaven Town Charter, signed in 1922. And at the bottom, in bold, confident ink, was the signature of Alistair Vance, beside a clause he had insisted on himself, dedicating the school lands to the town forever. Silas pointed a trembling finger at the document. A promise made in good faith is more binding than any law written on paper. They had it, the moral argument and the legal one, the key evidence. The plan was now complete. The annual shareholders' meeting was Marcus Thorne's coronation. He stood on the stage of the vast, sterile auditorium at Vance Global headquarters, a conquering hero. The Oakhaven project was the centerpiece of his presentation. He spoke of efficiency, of future growth, of shareholder value. He was charming, confident, and utterly convincing. Eleanor watched from her seat on the board of directors' dais. She was calm, her heart beat with a slow, steady rhythm. In the back of the auditorium, almost hidden in the shadows, sat Liam Cole. He wore a simple, dark suit that couldn't quite disguise the quiet strength of his frame. He was a redwood in a forest of manicured shrubs. His presence was her anchor. When Marcus finished his presentation to a round of applause, Eleanor stood up. A murmur went through the room. This was not on the agenda. "Marcus," she said, her voice clear and amplified by the microphone. "An impressive presentation. But you've omitted a few key details about the Oakhaven site." Thorne's smile tightened at the edges. "Eleanor, I'm not sure this is the time or the place." "Oh, I think it's the perfect time and place." On the large screen behind them, the sleek rendering of the distribution hub vanished. It was replaced by a map of the Oakhaven aquifer. Then a series of documents appeared. Internal memos from Northwood Industries, falsified environmental reports, and then the soil sample data Sarah Cole had uncovered, showing lethal levels of contamination. Gasps rippled through the audience. Marcus's face had gone pale. "This is absurd, slanderous. This is unverified, unsubstantiated data from a disgruntled former employee." "Is it?" Eleanor's voice was cold steel. The screen changed again. Now it showed a video. A terrified man, the chemist, speaking to a camera. He detailed the entire cover-up, naming dates, times, and the man who gave the orders. He named Marcus Thorne. The final piece of evidence appeared on the screen. A complex web of financial transactions, traced by Liam and verified by Anya's team. It showed millions of dollars funneled from the Northwood acquisition into a series of shell corporations, and then into the private accounts of local officials and regulators. And a final multi-million-dollar payout into an offshore account controlled by one person. Marcus Thorne. The auditorium was silent. The air was thick with shock and the stench of corruption. Marcus stood frozen on the stage, his empire of lies crumbling around him in a matter of minutes. His power, his charm, his future, all of it, gone. Eleanor's gaze swept across the board members, the shareholders, the press. Vance Global will be withdrawing its offer for the Oakhaven property immediately. Furthermore, we will be launching a full, independent investigation into the activities of Northwood Industries and Mr. Thorne. We will cooperate fully with the authorities. She took a breath. And we will take full responsibility for the damage that has been done. Her eyes found Liam's in the back of the room. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was done. The fallout was swift and brutal. Marcus Thorne was fired. Indictments followed. The story was on the front page of every major newspaper. Vance Global's stock plummeted, then slowly began to recover as Eleanor took decisive, transparent action. She didn't do it for the stock price. She did it because it was right. She established the Sarah Cole Foundation for Environmental Justice, seeding it with $100 million of corporate funds. Its first act was to finance the complete environmental cleanup of the Oakhaven aquifer. Its second was to provide a grant to the town of Oakhaven, an anonymous donation to tear down the old, crumbling elementary school and build a new one. A beautiful, modern building with bright classrooms, a new library, and a state-of-the-art science lab. A place worthy of the children it was meant to serve. A month after the board meeting, Eleanor Vance walked into the office of her successor and tendered her resignation. She sold her glass-walled penthouse in the city. She sold her silent German sedan. She shed the armor of her old life piece by piece until all that was left was the woman underneath. She didn't know what came next. For the first time in her life, she didn't have a 5-year plan. The uncertainty was terrifying and liberating. Weeks later, she was back in Oakhaven. She drove a simple, unassuming car, the windows down, the air filled with the scent of pine. She was following the signs for the Oakhaven Elementary School's grand reopening and parents' night. The new school was beautiful. It sat beside the ancient oak tree, a marriage of the new and the old. Laughter spilled from the open doors. The grounds were filled with families. Eleanor walked through the crowd, an anonymous face among many. She felt a sense of peace she hadn't known was possible. She saw him near the new playground. Liam was listening patiently as a young, earnest teacher spoke to him. The teacher was gesturing with a sheaf of papers. "Lily is a wonderful girl, Mr. Cole. So bright. But she does tend to daydream. Her mind wanders. We need to work on keeping her focused on the curriculum." Liam just nodded, his expression calm. He was used to being misunderstood by a world that valued standardized metrics over a child's imagination. He looked tired, but in his eyes there was a lightness that hadn't been there before. The weight of a decade had been lifted. The principal stepped up to a small, temporary stage. He thanked the community, the construction crews, the teachers, and finally he said, "I want to extend our deepest, most profound gratitude to the anonymous benefactor who made all of this possible, the Sarah Cole Foundation." A polite, appreciative applause spread through the crowd. Liam's eyes found Eleanor's across the schoolyard. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. Everything was in that look. Gratitude, respect, a shared understanding that ran deeper than words. She walked over to him, the teacher having moved on to another parent. Lily ran up, her face bright with excitement. She took Eleanor's hand. Then she took her father's hand. With the simple, undeniable logic of a child, she placed Eleanor's hand in his. Their fingers brushed. His hand was warm, the calluses a rough, comforting map of the life he had built. It was the first time they had touched. He didn't pull away. His fingers closed gently around hers. They stood there together, a man, a woman, and a child, watching the families of Oakhaven celebrate a new beginning. The past had been unearthed, the truth had been told, and a promise had been kept. Some fences mark where land ends, others mark where it begins.